Where are you? Where did you go without me? I thought you cared about me. Nasaan ka? Nasaan ang pera? Ibalik mo na ang pera. Ibalik mo na. That's for Marcos Jr. 203 billion pesos. You owe it to the Filipino people. Give it back.
That was vice presidential candidate Walden Bello belting out Frank Sinatra at the COMELEC vice presidential debates in March. In running as the vice president of Labor leader Leody de Guzman, Bello has certainly made an impact on the 2022 election with his antics and his zingers.
The main reason that I have decided to run as part of the tandem of Leody is because we really want to prevent what we consider the greatest threat to the country at this point, which is the Marcos-Duterte axis of evil. So that's the main reason that I'm running. I have decided to come back to politics because it poses a major threat to the country.
I'm Franco Luna, a reporter for Puma Podcast. In this episode, let's get to know the academic and author running alongside Labor leader Leody de Guzman.
My mind was made up to run when I was already in the States. No? When I left the Philippines, I had no intention of running for the vice presidency. But when Leody had been chosen as our presidential candidate, I could not refuse Leody. So now that I have plunged into this, I'll be there for the whole campaign period.
When not on the campaign trail, Bello is a tough-talking professor of sociology at Binghamton University in New York State. A former lawmaker, he represented the Akbayan Citizens Action Party in the House of Representatives from 2009 to 2015, when he resigned over irreconcilable differences. But during that time, he authored the landmark Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013, which acknowledges the government's responsibility for atrocities committed during the regime of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. He actually got arrested multiple times during martial law. He was credited for breaking into the World Bank and stealing confidential documents linking the International Monetary Fund and World Bank to Marcos. So in practically every interview since the campaigning began, Bello took the opportunity to lash out at presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos. Here's a snippet from his interview on The Chiefs on One News.
They raped the country for 14 years. They have not made any apologies to the people. Now Bongbong Marcos wants to rape the country. It's shameless. You know, the way that these people are thinking that they can just away with constantly raping the country. That is why I will never apologize for what I said 2 weeks ago, which was FYM. Okay? Huwag na ho natin sabihin kung ano yung FYM. Alam na ng mga ating kababayan yan.
As you can imagine, the 76-year-old is no stranger to controversy, and this disruptiveness obviously extends to his plans for the status quo.
We're not out to please the voters, but we're out to confront them with the facts about the roots of our country's problems and the radical solutions that are necessary for it. We also need political reform. We also advocate the decriminalization of abortion. We advocate same-sex marriage, and we advocate divorce. These are all measures that any modern country needs to have at this point. We need cultural and social development, and we really need...
Bello and Leody stand out for their socialist platform. They're both running under the Partido Lakas ng Masa. In Bello's own words in an AMA on Reddit, a democratic socialist government means, quote-unquote, an economy and society that works for everyone. This means giving workers control and management of corporations and having them participate in governance instead of technocrats and politicians. Of note, he's also emphasized an independent foreign policy, which for him means staying out of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
The global South countries have condemned the invasion, but they don't want to go any further. And certainly they don't want to be played by the United States at this point in time. And I think that is just right. We need to
look at the complexities of the situation. We must condemn the Russian invasion, but we also must understand that this was provoked to a great degree by the United States and NATO, and that the danger in the Asia Pacific is not Chinese taking over Taiwan, but the US heightening the tensions in this area. If Leody de Guzman and I win the elections, and miracles happen, we would have a very independent foreign policy, one that would completely replace the kind of very pro-US policy and occasional very opportunistic policy with respect to China that our previous governments have offered.
As socialists, the two are famous for wanting to implement a wealth tax on the 250 richest families in the country. They're also pushing for comprehensive agrarian reform, a 750 peso minimum wage per day, and an end to contractualization. The duo have also promised that at least half of their cabinet would be women or LGBT. On climate change, Bello says their government can phase out all coal plants within 2 years. They've also said they plan to cut the size of the Philippine National Police and Armed Forces of the Philippines by half. On top of this, they also want to disband the IATF and the NTF-ELCAC, repeal the anti-terror law, and surrender to the ICC's investigation on the war on drugs. If elected, Walden has said he'd like to be appointed Finance Secretary to oversee these reforms. Here's how he defended this at the CNN Philippines vice presidential debates.
This is going to be made as transfer payments to social services. Is this going to be possible? Of course, it is possible. One, it is very small part of their income. Okay. Two is that there are, in fact, many people among the rich in this country at this point, especially the younger rich, who are saying that we really need to be socially responsible. The rich now have to pay because they benefited from the pandemic. So this is a very sound thing. Pero ginamit tayo, they used the pandemic to get what they wanted. So,
as it stands, he's made more enemies than friends on the campaign trail. He was declared persona non grata by Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte for calling the city a haven for drug traffickers. And he made headlines for calling out his rivals during the CNN Philippines debates.
Senator Soto, Senator Pangilinan, pareho kayo nagboto sa CREATE Act that gave big tax breaks. So what are you saying, that you are not guilty of this process? Tama na yan, kalokohan na yan. We have had all of these foreign-oriented laws that have been passed recently, and Senate President Soto was the one who pushed them through Congress, no? And Senator Pangilinan also signed, no? So paano yan? Sinasabi nyo for Filipino kayo, and then you're liberalizing all these laws, no?
The biggest issue hounding Bello and Calyodi's platform is that it would require changing existing laws, which would also mean having to go through a Congress that's not supportive of their positions. But both insist that they're in it to win it for a better Philippines.
We ask people, just look at our records, no? And look at the program that we offer. We're not politicians, but it takes non-politicians to save our country at this point, because the politicians, are the ones ruining it. I'm confident that we will make it to the finish line.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Presh Capistrano and produced by Kat Ventura. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or two. For more coverage on the elections, search #Pumapangulo in this channel. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka and Puma Podcast wherever you listen. Thanks for listening.